Hello, everyone. Greetings and welcome to your favorite podcast channel, Nigeria Unfiltered. Shalom Mufoma Erude is my name, and I'm happy to have you again. In our last episode, we talked about the summary of some ethnic nationalities and their roles in pre-colonial Nigeria. In the sequence of things, we're going to be looking at Prelude to colonialism in Nigeria and, of course, Africa by extension. I'd like you to know that when talking about the background to colonialism, something comes first, and that is slave trade. Before I start, what event can be adduced as a reason for the white man to come to Africa? Several historians, scholars have come up with reasons, but we're going to be focusing on history today. A lot of things led to the coming of the white men to Africa, Nigeria, precisely in this topic. One of the first things that led to the white man coming to Africa was their connection with the African society. Remember, in the course of this series, I said that the first white men that visited Nigeria were the Portuguese. They came to Nigeria first in 1452, the person of Roy de Sequeira, and in 1485, Afonso de Aveiro came in. When they came to Nigeria, they touched base with different kingdoms. The Benin, of course, the Niger Delta area, even as far as Eko and some other Middle Belt area. And of course, what was the purpose of their coming? It was to trade. And in those days, what was the terms of agreement of the trade? The trading was basically on humans. They needed Africans because history has it that Africans were much stronger and they endure more, and their cost of labor is far cheaper than the white man. That said, of course, you know that they met and they saw a lot of things in Africa, like the blacksmith in the Benin Kingdom and other kingdoms. They met different sculpture, artworks, and etc. But we're going to be focusing on slave trade. The Portuguese were the first set of persons that came to Nigeria for business. They started the slave trade, and most of the African kingdom and chiefs, they became great merchants of slaves. That was how King Jaja for Pobo also became very powerful. We also have powerful men in the Niger Delta, in the Cheif kingdom, in the Ijaw kingdom, and even in the Robos. And of course, stretched as far as other kingdoms in Nigeria, to be precise. So slavery actually took place in the 15th century in Nigeria. That said, another reason that led to slave trade in Nigeria was as a result of the need to get cheap laborers as against the Europeans and the white man. Of course, the amount to pay for an African person is far lesser than what you pay for a white man. And also, return for that individual that is a black man is far more than what you will get for a even high purchase of the white man. So all these variables put together further validated and gave the white men the need and the importance to come into Africa to desecrate and take our best hand out of the country. Not until in the 17th and 18th century the British official could not access Nigeria and some other part of Africa. So the Portuguese, the Spanish government, and even Brazil dominated slave trade in Nigeria and West Africa. That said, I'd like you to know this. It was in the 18th and 19th century that the British officials took over the slave business in most part of West Africa and Nigeria, to be precise. A major factor that led to the elongation of slave trade in Africa was the discovery of the New World. The New World is what we know as the United States of America. Of course, I like you to know that the United States of America was started originally by the Indians. Though Christopher Columbus was the first person that discovered the New World. And of course, different persons started migrating to the New World. That is why today America is a universe inside the universe. No one nation can claim ownership of America. The Red Indians are there, Israelis are there, Europeans are there. So even Africans are there. And the reason for Africa persons in America is not far-fetched. During the New World period, when they were needing humans for manual labor, talking about the banana plantation, sugar plantation, they discovered that Africans are very strong. So they were transported from Africa to America. So you will discover that there was a lot of movement. Most of our best brains, our best hands were lost during slave trade. Our leaders then, the chiefs and the merchants, they grew so popular and wealthy because of the gains they were able to get from the white men. That said, the largest route during slave trade or the slave era was the transatlantic route. Most of the Exodus movement was through that route. And according to history, between 1662 and 1807, the British government were able to purchase an estimated 3,415,500 Africans. Between 1662 and 1807, the British government purchased a total of 3,415,500 Africans. What the heck? The population of Africa drastically reduced. And out of these persons, a total of 2,964,800 people survived. And where were they taken to? They were taken to America. You can see the number of persons that were being exported from our land on a daily basis. And history has it that most Africans were taken to America. That is why the black Americans, they trace their roots back to Africa, because all of them, they are from Africa. And as society develops, they started losing touch of their home. And that is how you now see a black man telling you from Alabama and all that. But their original home is Africa. That said, the presence of the New World brought a sensation to the business, slave trade. And every now and then, one way to know that you are a wealthy person is the number of slaves you have been able to sell to the white man. That said, we want to fast forward to what led to the abolition and the end of slave trade. History has it that several factors played out, but chief amongst them was when the Labour Party won popular majority in the House of Commons. One of the foremost parliamentarians from the Labour Party was a man called William Wilberforce. William Wilberforce was very instrumental to the abolition of slave trade in Africa. Although the journey started long before then, the person of Thomas Clarkson played another major role. Thomas Clarkson was a researcher and a sojourner. He toured around Europe and Africa, and he saw the grave consequences and the degree of abomination, assault, harm that was meted on fellow humans, even though they were black. That was an era that racism was at its peak. Humans dehumanizing fellow humans. In fact, the African race was seen as an error. If you are a black man, then you are seen as a second-class citizen. You are seen as someone that is meant to be in the toilet. You are not meant to sit with fellow humans. You are not meant to even touch a fellow human. What the heck? That was the height of racism. That said, following the pressure by the Labour Party parliamentarian led by William Wilberforce, in 1809, the then King of England, King George III, officially signed content that brought about the end of slave trade. I'd like you to know one thing. Even after that was signed, slave trade continued. And it was said that what the British government did was to announce that any slave that was able to step on the soil of the United Kingdom is automatically free. That was how persons struggled for life, and as soon as they stepped their foot on United Kingdom, they became free from the bondage. That said, there happened to be a new problem after the end of slave trade, because as persons started migrating in great numbers, exodus movement to British land, the land now became too small to contain everybody. In the midst of this quagmire, the government thought it wise to look for new lands where they can develop all these variables, all these factors start tilting towards colonialism. And that was how the place Freetown was established, which is present-day Sierra Leone. So Freetown was established for persons who were erstwhile slaves to live now as free men and women. A popular person that was able to survive this period was Samuel Ajayi Crowther, who history has that later became a bishop in Africa and in Nigeria. That said, I'd like you to note this very clear. After the end of slave trade, it now dawned on the European that Africa was a fertile ground for business and extension of their territory. I'd like you to know that because of slave trade and other factors, population increase in Europe, the land became too small for even their citizens, let alone the black men. All this put together brought about the need for colonialism. Another major factor that played out, that crystallized the commencing of colonial rule in Africa, was the Industrial Revolution that erupted France and Great Britain in the 17th and 18th century. Because of the proliferation of machines to replace human labor, goods and products increased drastically. Every production has its own demand. Now, the white men were faced with a fresh problem. And what is that problem? The market for their goods. Not just the market where they can get raw materials, access to raw materials to produce whatever they need to make life comfortable for them. Another factor that played out was they also needed to leave their current home because of congestion that is making it no longer too comfortable for them, and they needed to dwell in a new land. Variables put together brought about the introduction of colonialism. Moving forward, it now attracted all other European countries that were interested in trade and were interested in Africa, and there was now a kind of argument, struggle, and contention as to who will take this and whose is this and whose is that. We have Turkey, we have Belgium, we have Portuguese, we have the Spanish government, we have the British government, we even have the Americans, we have French. They were all scrabbling for Africa. And Germany also. It was against this backdrop that the then Chancellor of Germany, Otto von Bismarck, called the world leaders to a conference, hence the Berlin Conference. In that conference, the major discourse was on Africa continent, the important role Africa has in the world. And it was in that conference that these countries started getting allocations, territories under their control. The Berlin Conference started in December 1884 and ended in January 1885. Immediately after the Berlin Conference, Africa was partitioned to the various power blocks. Portuguese and the Spanish government took over some part of East Africa, Central Africa. The French government and the British government took over West Africa. So West Africa is divided into two major colonial blocks. We have the Anglophone speaking countries, that is the English speaking countries, and the Francophone speaking countries. Of course, prior to the Berlin Conference, a major power broker in terms of colonial domination was the Belgium. Belgium was the one in charge of countries like Congo, Congo Brazzaville, Congo Kinshasa, and other countries around West Africa. So immediately after the Berlin Conference, the Belgian government handed over to the British government. That said, we will like to end this conversation here because we are looking at prelude to colonialism. What led to colonialism? In our next episode, we will focus on colonial role in Africa. Till when next we meet, I remain Shalom Ufoma Erude.